Fearing the COVID zombie apocalypse, DC teachers line up body bags, Iowa teachers write their own obituaries, all because they are being asked to return to the classroom and teach. Well, seems pretty fitting, given their documented failures in the classroom. They've already been teaching like The Walking Dead anyway, eating away young brains with toxic politics and sex, instead of, actually teaching them. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is The Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today, we're starting with K-12 schools and doomsday scenarios some teachers are playing out in defiance of bringing kids back this fall. So, teachers don't want to have to go back to the classroom. They're, with all due respect, behaving like a bunch of whiny babies. There are all sorts of other people that have gone to work. There are all sorts of other people who are around people every day. They do what they do. They wash their hands. They wear their masks, and life goes on. The idea that you are somehow special, that you are somehow unusually vulnerable is stupid and childish. And let me go one step further with this. Body bags are actually things that you put corpses in. Hefty bags with red duct tape aren't the same thing.
All right, and what you're referencing is happened in Washington, D.C., where teachers lined up what they called body bags. They're not educated enough to know that these are not body bags. Those are, hefty bags. Outside of their school system offices as a way of protesting the potential return to work order that they were going to find out just a couple days later in the week. And that group, like teachers in Chicago, LA, and elsewhere, are concerned that they may be asked to return to the in-classroom instruction rather than they want to be, online virtual learning. And so these body bags were meant to draw attention to the possibility that they could be classified as essential workers and basically be put at risk of contracting the COVID.
So they could all get together and go down to the local hardware store. They could all sit in a room somewhere making their arts and craft project with little body bags, taking hefty bags and duct tape.
And then they put on little signs that said RIP, favorite
right.
teacher, or distance only.
So they had no problem doing that together.
Correct.
Around other adults, I guess you could call these teachers adults by a stretch of the imagination, surrounded by other adults, right? But they can't go back to a bunch of little kids who are highly resistant to the virus. Okay, this is and the kick in the pants is all their whining got them their way, because what happened?
Just a couple days later, ABC reported that the public schools in the nation's capital will open, but with full-time computer distance learning.
You really ought to pay them less. They really should have their salaries docked. They really should.
Well,
will it happen?
No.
No. And will they walk out of, watch, how much you want to bet they walk out of digital learning somewhere in October for a week, demanding a raise? Red for ed, baby.
Red for ed. Well, they're not the only ones being the dramatists. We have Iowa teachers. I would not expect this out of, Iowans. I thought they were a little bit more resilient.
Teachers went to the same stupid education programs.
This is true. So Iowa GOP Governor Kimberly Reynolds said that the state schools must hold at least half of their core instruction in person unless they have a positive coronavirus test. Okay, affecting a certain percentage of the county, so on and so forth. So that prompted, because they might have to be in person half the time, teachers to write their own obituaries.
Mock obituaries.
Well, I think they think it's their real obituaries, because that's about the level of quality writing they would have.
Here you've got Jeremy Dummkrieger. That's you speak German, right? What does Krieger mean in German?
I don't know.
Whatever it is, it's a Dummkrieger.
It's Dummkrieger.
Dumb. Does that mean dumb? Probably not. Jeremy Dummkrieger, 43, writes, passed away on insert date here due to complications arising from COVID. With the way they're marking this, the way they're identifying COVID deaths, he could die at 87 from pneumonia, and they'll still put COVID. And I like his little, is that a haiku? He died alone, isolated from the family. Who meant the world. It's almost haikuian, isn't it?
Who meant the world to him.
Haikuian. He died alone. Well, why did you die alone?
Because you're not allowed to go and see them.
Yeah, poor.
Apparently. But the simple fact that that's all he has,
that's his whole life.
That's his entire life is. You died from COVID,
teacher.
and I guess,
who wants to admit that for the
I
rest
want to
of
know what
eternity?
his If he's an English teacher, Lord help us, that's what he teaches his students. Well, we're not done because that's the drama that's happening by the teachers. But the schools, they're really trying to, move forward and have plans. And we do have at least, one school district in Florida who has made plans of what they're going to do. And they made a video to show and calm the nerves, we'll say, of all the parents.
Calm the nerves. This is a hostage video. What they did is they so desperately don't want to teach down in Manatee, Florida, that they created an apocalyptic doomsday version. This is a hostage situation. Show the clip.
The school district of Manatee County is committed to keeping students and staff safe as they return to schools for the 2020-2021 school year. The reopening plan represents the hard work of parents, district leaders, and educators who work together to develop comprehensive plans to ensure a safe return to school. Social distancing will be adhered to in all shared spaces, including classrooms, hallways, and cafeterias. Every effort will be made to put as much distance between students as possible. Children will be randomly screened for signs of illness. Temperatures may be taken as they board the bus and enter school. Meals will be prepackaged to limit exposure. Students will be seated to ensure social distancing.
Okay, as if enough students don't already think that school is like a prison. That's just depressing. I think you get more contact and more engagement in prison than you do in what they're planning to do for these kids.
I watched a documentary on Chernobyl, right? And the doctors there were dressed that way. The teachers, what is with the rubber gloves? Where do they get the lab coats?
I thought it was the nurse who was coming into the classroom. Oh, that's a teacher.
Did they get the lab coats?
They got a mask, they get the shield, they get a coat.
Shields, and they've got
superheroes.
Lab coats.
They're superheroes now. That's what they're going to say. They got their lab coats. And
how about that perp walk? The perp walk, right? Where those kids' hands in their pockets, head down. We're going to take every effort. We're going to spend everything we can do to keep your kids away from each other.
And if we want to get a little more modern talk, there was a comedian and a mother named Tiffany Jenkins who responded to this video on her TikTok, and she said it's a little Hunger Games-y, and basically she's referencing the dystopian novel and movies that we've probably all seen. And guess what? Your classroom is a dystopian novel, essentially. That's what it is.
Not for the ways you think it is.
Yeah.
It's not the virus that the kids ought to be scared of. It's all those little nurse ratchets running around.
So we've been talking about the teachers, and these teachers belong to teachers' unions, and these teachers' unions have absolutely no care in the world, we'll say, about teaching your kids, but they do have their politics aligned. They've been laying out basically their safe schools plans. Safe schools, they're calling it, and basically what this looks like with the whole COVID-19. Now, under the banner of Journeys for Justice Alliance, which is a Chicago-based activist org, a document has been written up with a list of demands, that must be met, or no return to the classroom. Again, this is what teachers' unions do. They're saying that no return to the classroom is going to be healthy because the schools must be equitable. Now, if you look at them, you can see them on your screen. 2 of the 8 demands actually deal with the virus itself. We should have smaller classes, protective gear, there should be cleaning, testing protocols, all that. But then we get into the real meat and potatoes of what these teacher unions always want. They demand that there be police-free schools. They want a moratorium on evictions and foreclosures. They want direct financial handouts to those with unspecified critical social needs.
Just money.
Just money. They want a moratorium on charter and voucher programs and standardized testing. They want adequate and equitable funding and a fresh influx of cash for public schools provided by taxing billionaires and Wall Street. It actually says that, taxing billionaires and Wall Street. And here's the big one. They want a full moratorium on private education.
Yep. They're literally telling you, the teachers' unions, the ones who haven't been able to teach your kids, the ones who have left your kids semi-literate, the ones who have psychologically and sociologically transformed your kids' minds with all of this race, politics, gender, class nonsense, all of this global warming, all of this radical sex education, are now telling you and the parents, you're the ones paying for this, right? Telling you, the mom and dad, that, and telling the school district, the school people, we're not doing this unless you to get rid of all private education. So in other words, we will have no deeply Soviet of them. We will have no competition. We will have all kinds of money, not taken from us, taken from the billionaires on Wall Street. We will have that money, right? We will only have schools if they're equitable. And right, everybody gets the same crappy public education or no one gets an education. Get rid of vouchers, get rid of charters. You can't parody these people.
No, you can't. But a whole list of them have shown their support for it. So I'm just going to read it. Just name off, if you live even remotely in this area, it's coming to a place near you. Chicago, Boston, LA, Massachusetts, St. Paul, Midwest Academy, the Milwaukee, go Wisconsin. You have Racine Educators, Little Rock Education, Oakland Education, and of course, the big one, the Democratic Socialists of America.
There you go. And what they're doing is they're basically telling you that school is going to be the way you get ushered into the new socialist reality. They recognize that as this country lurches to the left, that socialism, unless something changes radically, socialism is the future. And a very harsh and repressive kind of socialism. I think these little apparatchiks realize that the schools are going to be in a situation when that happens. The schools will be indoctrination centers. They are already, and they're anxious to get down to their business, but notice what they're doing. They're associating with schooling every other aspect of the social democrat policy. That's why, what was the last one you mentioned? Democrat Socialists.
The Democratic Socialists of America.
That's why they were so easy to, in fact, they could have written this. They probably wrote this and handed it to the teachers union. Yep.
You know, maybe, Dr. Duke, we should get rid of that private education. We shouldn't have it at all because it's just so expensive. It is so expensive, and for decades and decades, it has cost so much more money than public education.
Not.
Said no one ever. So, New York Times, the good old New York Times, the newspaper of record once upon a moon, they actually have stated that K-12 public schools are reopening more slowly from COVID than the private schools because, you know, public schools have less money to be able to, handle it. Reporter Claire Kane Miller actually said three times, one article. The article is called "In the Same Towns, Private Schools Are Reopening While Public Schools Are Not." She said it three times that the public schools don't get enough money compared to the private schools. So the Lying Times Miller actually wrote, private schools have always had more flexibility and usually more money than public schools. Public schools tend to have less money than private schools. And then she also said public schools typically don't have the resources that private schools do.
And guess what? It's all a lie. It's not true. We've got the numbers for you. It's staggering. This should be a surprise to no one. The public schools, actually, because they have the power to coerce you, the homeowner, taking your money without even asking you, right? All the property taxes, all the different kind of referendum they pass every year at voter time, they have, to the surprise of nobody, a lot more money.
Of course, yes. Fact. In 1991, 1992, back in the good old days, the Department of Education estimated that public K-12 spent about 43 to 52% per student more than private schools. Okay? 43 to 52% more than private schools. Now that percentage has nearly doubled to 80%. So they are spending 80% more, yes. Research by Just Facts using Department of Education data and the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis data, they found that public schools spend about $14,439 per kid. Okay, $14,439. Private schools, $8,039. Wow, look at that chart. Let's see if I can remember from math class what a chart looks like. If there is a line and it is going up, as you go over to the right, what does that mean? Oh, that means more. More is being spent.
Yep. And ask yourself what happens to private schools if they fail. They're gone. What happens to failed private school teachers if they can't get the job done?
Wah, wah.
They are fired. What happens if public schools fail?
Dollar
they get
sign.
more money, right? In fact, that's what we do. Who gets
Cha-ching,
more money?
cha-ching.
The more you can prove that your school's a demonstrated failure, like these inner city schools, the more we're going to dump now money into them because money's the answer to everything. And let me question, what does it cost to homeschool kids, the average cost?
Oh, let's see. Not anywhere.
About $500 a year.
Let me repeat this. The books.
Let me repeat this. It costs 80% more to educate Public school kids over private school kids. We're talking about $14,000, $15,000 versus $8,000 versus $500. Which kids do the best on testing? Which kids seem to do the best when they get to college? Which kids are actually, in a recent survey, less racist than public and private school kids? That would be homeschool kids.
Well, and if you want to add a little bit more salt in the wound there of the public school, the DOE's figures for public school spending actually doesn't even include the cost of state government administration, unfunded pension liabilities, public worker post-employment benefits like the health insurance that they get. So that number should be ratcheted up. And the private school, the $8,000, that includes everything. They actually put all their numbers together. So
yeah, you're talking closer to $25,000 a kid in terms of all that has to go in to educate that kid, and you're not educating them. The biggest racket in America today is public schools. And with all due respect, don't get mad at me if you have to. Is there a more overpraised and underperforming group in this country than public school teachers? Let me repeat that. Is there a more overpraised and fawned over and admired and just they're so is there a more overpaid and underperforming group of people that are not called NBA players?
I was going to say certain actors and actresses.
Right. Out of the Hollywood and sports community.
Then yes, absolutely. Okay.
I mean, of course, the WNBA would take that crown, or some women's soccer team. But this is serious business. Is there a more overpraised and underperforming group than American public school teachers? And look, if you're one of those good teachers who wants to fix the system, I'm not blaming you. I'm blaming all those educrats and unions who have put you in a pretty crappy situation.
It's time for some real education. The Space Trilogy, or Cosmic Trilogy, is a series of 3 science fiction novels by C.S. Lewis. A philologist named Elwyn Ransom is the hero of the first 2 novels and is an important character in the third. Perelandra is the second book in the Space Trilogy, set on the planet of Perelandra, or Venus. It was first published in 1943. Perelandra reimagines the Garden of Eden on Venus, where God has just created a new race of human beings to populate the planet. Ransom must defend the new Eve from an attack from Satan's designed to pull her and all of her children down to death and sin.
I'm always amazed how many people don't know that C.S. Lewis wrote a space trilogy. Now, you may think you're not a science fiction person, but wait for a minute. You really want to read these books. Lewis, on top of everything else he did, he wrote right about the period of World War II, he wrote a trilogy, 3 books on science fiction. The first one is called Out of the Silent Planet. The second one is called Perelandra, and the third one is called That Hideous Strength. And what's really remarkable about these books is Lewis looked at the history of science fiction in 1940, 1941, and he recognized something that a lot of people hadn't seen. Go back to the founder of science fiction, and that would be H.G. Wells. If you look at the science fiction novels of H.G. Wells, they're socialist in orientation because he was a socialist, right? So you had a situation where there was radical class equality. You didn't have different groups of people, higher and lower. The economy is almost always socialistic. The outlook in terms of everything has a very Marxist tinge to it. That's why Marxists don't believe in God. Socialists don't believe in God. If you look at the way science fiction was founded, there's really no God in heaven. And when human beings looked up at the sky, in H.G. Wells's socialist imagination, it was the sky that housed evil things. Evil things came from space to attack the innocent people of Earth. That benign notion of socialism, that all people are innocent, right? And so Lewis said, that's ridiculous. We're Christians, and we understand that the heavens aren't the problem. The heavens, where God and the angels reside, that's not what's evil in the universe. What's evil is human sin. We are a fallen world, not the heavens. When Adam and Eve made their sin, the world of this planet fell, but the heavens didn't. So what if we Lewis said, wrote a science fiction trilogy that started from the premise that God was in his heaven and that there were such things as angels. And so it's a very scientifically based trilogy. The things that he imagined in terms of space flight, rocket ships, the different climates and gravities of other planets are remarkably lifelike and realistic. In fact, much of what he said would ultimately go on to become scientifically true. So he predicted certain aspects of that. But it's a beautiful science fiction story that is predicated that there is a God in the universe. And so go to one of the clips from Paralander, the second book, when God has begun creating life on Venus for the very first time, and he's got an Adam and an Eve figure. And the Eve figure is being tempted by Satan. Satan manages to make his way from this planet to Venus in a way that will blow you away how he gets there. How Satan gets from Earth to Venus is absolutely brilliant. But he's there. And now he's trying to destroy Eve, the Eve figure, and the only person standing in his way is Elwyn Ransom of Oxford University, Cambridge University. Elwyn Ransom is a linguist. He has learned the language of the heavens, and he's able to talk to the Eve figure just like Satan can. And the thing that's so remarkable about this is that, keep in mind that Elwyn Ransom, the great linguist, was the character named after Tolkien, right? Lewis's good friend Tolkien, he puts him as the star of this under the name of Elwyn Ransom. And here's one quote about it. When Ransom, I should say, actually sees the devil, Elwyn Ransom, for the first time, he makes the following observation about what it meant. It came to his mind that in certain old philosophers and poets, he had read that the mere sight of the devil was one of the greatest among the torments of hell. It had seemed to him till now merely a quaint fancy. And yet, as he now saw, even the children know better. No child would have any difficulty in understanding that there might be a face, the mere beholding of which was a final calamity. The children, the poets, and the philosophers were right. As there is one face above all the worlds, merely to see, which is irrevocable joy. So too, at the bottom of all worlds, the face is waiting, whose sight alone is the misery from which none who behold it can ever recover. And though there seemed to be, and indeed were, 1,000 roads by which a man could walk through the world, there was not a single one which did not lead sooner or later to the beatific vision of God or the miserific vision of Satan. We're all on a path. We're going to heaven or to hell. And at the top of the path is the beatific vision of the Creator, and at the bottom is the miserific vision of the destroyer. Good stuff. Read it.
Read the first book, the second, and the third book. But anyways, as always, you can follow us on Facebook and Parler. And if you have a question for our Friday Q&A, visit freedomproject.com/askduke or send us a message on social media. Don't forget, The Dr. Duke Show is offered on more than 12 podcast platforms, such as Apple, Stitcher, and Spotify. Simply subscribe and consider leaving that precious, precious and coveted 5-star review to keep the show growing. Now we're going to wrap things up with our fun fact of the day. C.S. Lewis gave away the royalties from his books, and he was shocked to learn that the government still expected him to pay the taxes on the money he earned. He also never actually expected to make money from his books to begin with, and thought that by the time he died, they would be all out of print.
And yes, his family, what's left of it, the sons of Joy Davidson, his wife, are still making money off that legacy. And that's our show. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie. Until next time, keep shooting for the stars, my friends.